Thank you and good morning. Good to be with you. If we were to invite a 5-year-old child to come up here and ask them, what would you prefer, the gift of a toy or the gift of an education? Most of the time that 5-year-old child would say, give me the toy, give me the toy. If we were to bring that child back 5 years later as a 10-year-old and say, what would you like, the gift of an education or the gift of this Xbox or this tablet, this iPhone? Most of the time they'd still say, give me that iPhone, right? The hope is that for you, as you move on in your high school education, as you sit here today, that you would not say the iPhone, right? That you are beginning to realize the gift of an education, not only for what it will be able to provide for you, what job you might have in the future, but also what it might be able to do for others, and also the ability that it will give you to reflect on our world, to think critically, to examine the issues that are arising in society. The gift of an education. But of course, here at Tampa Jesuit or at any school, it is not simply the gift of an education. It's also the gift of faith. And I hope you realize what a tremendous gift that is. A few weeks ago, I imagine you had a Mass of the Holy Spirit here in Tampa. I was able to be with 4 different high schools in the province to celebrate that Mass. And I think that's a critically important Mass these days. It's always been an important Mass, but critically important. Why? Because it's a remembrance that God is within us. God's Spirit, God's Holy Spirit, is within us. And why is that important? Because so many people feel alone these days. So many people feel alone. So many people are dying, taking their lives with these diseases of despair. That's what they're called. Addiction, depression, suicide. And the common denominator on all of these is that the people feel alone. I had the opportunity, the terrible opportunity, to have a phone call from a college friend a few weeks ago whose son had taken his life with some street-bought drug had fentanyl in it. And between sobs, he described his son to me, who just sounded like an outstanding young man, who had so many resources around him, so many friends, so many family who loved him. And yet, in his writings and the things he left behind, he felt so alone. How could that be? How could that be? And so it's increasingly important that you take away from this school the gift of faith, the gift of the God, the gift of the Holy Spirit that is within you, within me, within all of us. How do we have access to that? How do we strengthen that conviction that we're not alone? Well, first we do it through the sacraments. As a Catholic school and as Catholics, we recognize that these sacraments, particularly the Eucharist, these are outward signs of an inner grace that in some mysterious way, taking part in the sacraments deepens our faith and our conviction and our heartfelt knowledge that we're not alone, that God's Spirit is within us. We also do it through silence, and that is increasingly difficult. You all are so busy. You have school, you have homework, you have clubs and sports and practice, and the moment of silence or an opportunity for silence comes along, we fill that. We fill that with social media or scrolling TikTok or Instagram, and we avoid silence. And I think we avoid it because that Spirit within us that doesn't leave us alone is the Spirit of truth. It will tell us a great truth about ourselves, a beautiful truth about who we're called to be, our own goodness, our own talents and gifts. It'll also tell us some uncomfortable truths about the changes we need to make in our lives. And so my sales pitch, my reason for being here and asking to speak today, is simply to ask you a favor, that for the rest of your life, as you move on in your life, when you feel alone, and we all will feel alone, that you recognize that you're not. that you recognize that God's Holy Spirit is within you, guiding you, calling you to truth and new life, and consoling you. May God bless each one of you. May God give you the grace to recognize that.